Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCast, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey. Welcome to a special edition of the RChain RCast. This week we present to you the entire AMA interview from June 3rd, 2021. So grab a coffee or whatever liquid refreshment you prefer, sit back and enjoy.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. So as we all know, Greg, you recently represented RChain participate in the International Financial Forum and as the only invited blockchain project. This conference is obviously very important in the world. This is an organization led by the former Chinese Central Bank Governor Zhou Xiaochuan, and many senior government officials and financial celebrities from many countries participate. So would you please talk about why you were invited?
Oh, well, it's a wonderful question. Thank you. So to be honest, I really feel that this was largely the work of our team in China. We have a remarkable team, and they were responsible for this opportunity. They put forward our message to the IFF, and that was the reason why we were accepted. And you know, I just want to emphasize that RChain was designed from the beginning to be an environmentally responsible and sustainable smart contracting blockchain. And what we want to do is to provide a coordination substrate for humanity as it enters the next very difficult phase of climate change. So what we're trying to do is to build a decentralized world computer and global database. We developed a version of proof-of-stake consensus coupled with a concurrent virtual machine that scales nearly linearly and with a much lower power consumption profile. So I think this was of interest to the IFF.
Okay, so Greg, so the second question is very interesting that we heard from the RChain community that you used to be paid zero during your tenure as RChain CEO. So is that true?
Well, let me give you a more accurate account. So for roughly the first 6 months of operation of the company, I didn't take any salary. And then after that, the board and the compensation committee felt it important for me to receive sort of regular compensation. And then in 2018, during the crypto winter, I want to commend all the RChain staff who agreed to take a 20% cut. And then at the end of 2019 and into the beginning of 2020, as COVID was affecting everyone, I stopped taking paycheck, and so did many other people on the RChain staff. And I used what money I had to keep the project going.
Okay, thank you. It's a very impressive answer. So there's also a rumor saying that Facebook's Libra project approaching you many times during RChain's tough times, but was turned down by you. So would you please tell us more details on this one? Thank you.
Sure. Another interesting question. So I was in talks with the folks in Libra. The reality is that the Facebook recruiters regularly approach me. They it's like, I think I show up in their queue every so often. And they reach out to me. So at one point I used one of the recruiters to gather more intelligence on what Facebook and Libra were doing for RChain. But I never had any intention of going to work with Facebook and Libra.
Wow, that's very smart steps. Okay, so Greg, so we come to the first question. So it's also about your charity. So the RChain's token REV is about 871 million so far. As a founder and chairman of RChain, so there's also a rumor saying that you only took 7 million REV and donated half of it to the development of the project. So many people are concerned that you only took such a small amount of REV, and they will definitely leave RChain due to the lack of value tied to it. So would you please tell me more about this to our friends? Thank you.
Again, thank you for the question. So just to be clear, in 2020, I spent about half of what I could get for the rev that I was awarded to keep the project going. As for the rev I was awarded, initially I took none. I'm not doing this for the money, and we'll talk about that. Then several members of the board and the community were concerned in much the same way you just expressed concern, that I had no incentive to stay with the project. So because I wanted the best for the project, I listened to their concerns and followed the guidance of the compensation committee. It was the compensation committee who set the total 7 million. But they also set it to come in milestones. And I used the second milestone payment to keep the project going, about half of it, a little bit more than half. So my motivations are not about money. Essentially, I'm working on RChain for my children. I have 4 beautiful children, and I can tell from the climate science that they're going to live during a time of great upheaval. In roughly a decade, we may see as many as 2.8 billion people forced to migrate due to such a mass migration will make the Syrian refugee crisis look like a walk in the park. But meanwhile, lest we think it's all about the humans, 80% of insects by biomass are gone. So this is a planet-wide emergency situation, all hands on deck. And to address the situation of this scope and scale, a planetary coordination mechanism. And I mean a global coordination greater than what was seen during the world wars. And I see a scalable smart contracting blockchain platform as pivotal in developing the kind of coordination layer we need to augment our ability to work together. And that's why I'm working on RChain.
Okay, thank you, Greg, for this very explicit explanation. So, Greg, so the 5th question is very straightforward. So when did you want to create RChain, and for what purpose?
So again, thanks for the question. I've been aware of the issues that we're trying to solve for several decades, but it wasn't until an entrepreneur, Fred Fisher, convinced me to build a decentralized social media platform that I realized that I had within my scope the ability to build a scalable world computer. So in about 2014, I shifted the work on the decentralized social media platform to that focus and began to work in earnest to deliver it. But in some sense, the work I did on Rosette at MCC and then BizTalk for Microsoft, and then also the discovery or invention, however you want to say it, of the row calculus were all stepping stones towards this goal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Greg, so I think many people are curious about your math enthusiasm. So when did you first get into math and computers, and what did you stick to this path?
Thanks for asking. So I've always been in love with mathematics. My pre-verbal memories, so this is before I could talk, I became directly aware of the notion of dimension. By the time I was in 2nd grade, I completed the math textbook in 2 weeks. And then the teacher started me on algebra. And we moved up to West Virginia, and no one knew about, my mathematical inclinations until I tested out of high school math in 8th grade. From then on, I began studying mathematics at the university where I discovered topology, and that was my first real love in mathematics. By the time I got to college, I was ready for deeper study, and so I was given the opportunity to do private tutorials in modal logic and topology. Around that time, Rich Salter joined the Oberlin College faculty in computer science, and through him I discovered that there were these connections between topology and computer science, such as the Scott topology, and that there were programming languages like Scheme that illustrated some of those connections. And when I started playing with Scheme, I was hooked. Later, while I was at MCC, which was the first US-based industrial research consortium, I heard Samson Abramsky talk at one of the OOPS laws about the computational interpretation of linear logic and the connection between proof, program, and concurrent. And it was like this whole new universe, this whole new world opened up. And I knew I could never develop software again unless it followed the sort of the correct by construction paradigm that was outlined by this approach.
Greg, so this is about a battle of dialogue. So there is a video over here that saying you having a heated academic discussion with Vitalik Buterin, the founder of the Ether, in about 2016. So do you still remember anything from that time, and what inspiration did that conversation give you? Thank you.
That's a good question. I don't remember it as particularly heated. Vitalik and Vlad and I and several met frequently from the end of 2015 to about the spring of 2016. We discussed different aspects of Casper. I think that the particular conversation you're referring to is one where I introduced Vitalik to the pi calculus. And the main thing I was trying to get across was the importance of concurrency. And that if you get a computational model for this right, then a whole lot of other seemingly unrelated problems are solved all at once. For example, in the mobile process calculi, like the pi calculus and the rho calculus, you have a single phenomenon, competition on a channel, that accounts both for sharding and for DAG-based acceleration. And these ideas are difficult to see until you've had some experience with it. I could tell from my conversations that Vitalik, as smart as he is, wasn't going to be able to come up to speed on these things fast enough without proper motivation. And I felt that the best motivation is just to build the solution, and he would be able to play with it and understand much better. I still think that he will come around, and I hope that he'll begin playing with RChain soon.
So Greg, so the next question is very in-depth. So what are the trump cards of RChain, and how is it different from other public chains? And besides, what are some of the plans that you're still looking forward in a very short term? Thank you.
Great question. In simple terms, there are two basic features that that makes our architecture suitable for the kind of coordination substrate that we're aiming to build. The first of these is that RChain scales nearly linearly as you add hardware. So all the other blockchains either remain the same or get slower as you add node network. RChain gets faster. If you stop and think about it, we've been scaling systems way of adding hardware for the last half century. And the reason is very simple. It's common sense. You can't know when your team is going to come up with the next software breakthrough, right? You can't budget for that. You can know exactly how much it's going to cost to order 1,000 more boxes and when they will be delivered. And this means you can do resource planning and a host of other crucial things associated with running and maintaining a network. So the only way to be able to scale is by adding hardware, is for the software architecture to be concurrent at the foundation. Now, the second of these ideas has to do with safety and security of the smart contracting platform, where users can write smart contracts on their own. When they can do that, then they can introduce bugs on their own, even if the core protocol layer is perfect, written by the angels from on high. So imagine if Ethereum had been running at 40K TPS when the DAO bug hit. In 1 second, the entire 150 million worth of ETH would have been drained. So like that, gone. Instead, the community had an entire month to respond to the problem, right? Because Ethereum was so slow. So in the next phase, where 2.0 blockchains are going to be competing at hundreds of Ks of TPS, there will not be a grace period afforded to Ethereum to face another DAO bug. but they will be there nonetheless. So unless there are important tools put into place to catch many of these kinds of errors before they are deployed. So, for example, in the case of the DAO bug, when you rewrite the buggy contract in Rolang, the reentrancy error becomes a race condition. So there's a race between updating the state and accepting the next request. With the critical tool of spatial behavioral types, we can catch these kinds of race conditions, as well as certain kinds of liveness and security errors at compile time before the code ever gets deployed. We can do this automatically. I've heard of no other blockchains even talking about this, let alone implementing it. And this has been on our roadmap from the beginning. We have prototypes already checked in that people can play with.
Okay, so Greg, so the next question is also about a dialogue between two giants. So we heard that you recently wrote a letter to Tesla's CFO about the BTS as payment. So would you please reveal more about your initial thoughts on this? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. So I was very encouraged by Tesla's behavior. First, they openly and practically recognized and signaled the importance of blockchain by accepting BTC as payment. Then, as they began to understand the irresponsibility and unsustainability of proof of work, they flipped and stopped accepting BTC, even though that meant the value of their own BTC holdings would drop precipitously. So what happened? They showed that they can admit when they're wrong and hold to principles. And this is incredibly rare in today's business environment. Given this very encouraging sign, it stood to reason that they might actually, look at a realistic solution. Further, since it was a rare opportunity to take some of the attention focused on Tesla and blockchain to a broader and more inclusive discussion of the real engineering issues, it made sense to craft that letter. So far, it has gotten RChain a lot of attention, and new members are joining the cooperative every day.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Okay, so Greg, so we came to the 10th question. So the RChain seems to have crossed a lot of crises in the past. So does that mean that your current opinion is that RChain is in a safe field?
No. Please understand the environmental crisis that we're all facing. All of humanity, in fact, the entire planet, from the humans to the insects, are facing extinction unless we work together. The little ups and downs that RChain faced are nothing compared to what we will all face. The difficulties RChain faced were perfect for finding out who was in it to get rich quick and who was in it to put in the work to help build a planetary solution. But even if RChain delivers perfectly under time and under budget, there is still no guarantee that as a species, humanity will pick up the tools and begin to use them. For sure, there are some encouraging signs. The RChain community, for example, built RVote in 6 weeks. With no one in charge, the community built a cryptographically secure on-chain voting mechanism that can be used by any organization on the planet. Likewise, in 6 days, the community built an on-chain COVID passport, which expands nicely to self-sovereign identity, credentials, and data solutions. But these are no guarantees that people will hear the call in time. So no project, no person, no living creature is in a safe field now.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Okay, so Greg, so the next question can make you very relaxed because it's not about like blockchain. No, actually it's about it, but it's also about that we have heard you are a very big fan and fond of Chinese culture, that you are even very well versed in the Taiji sword and the Taiji spear. So in your life, do you compare the art of Taiji to your RChain? So would you please say something about this?
Thanks for asking. So it's an exaggeration to say that I'm well versed in sword and spear. I have studied a little sword and spear, and actually recently I've begun adding Qin to my regular Yang practice. But I am far from well versed in any of it. To be honest, I really love the fact that I can always learn something new about Tai Chi forms. They seem endlessly deep. But yes, there is a deep connection between Tai Chi's view of the world and the row calculus. In the same way that Tai Chi is always aware of the kernel of yang in the yin and the kernel of yin in the yang, row calculus is aware of the kernel of process, i.e. behavior, in name, the communication medium, and aware of the kernel of name in the communication medium in process. And this was it was designed with this idea in mind.
Okay, so thank you, Greg. And from the host, we have already finished the questions, and so far we have more than 3,000 people to watch and join our live talk. And so next one, we'd like to collect some questions from the audiences and to see whether they can ask something.
Great.
Okay, so there are a lot of old fans in our audiences, and they also they also propose some like suggestions, but the most focused question is about the pricing. So they heard recently the coin will be listed on at least 2 exchange institutes. So is it convenient for you to say more about this?
Sure. I mean, we're trying to go slow with the listings for a number of reasons. First of all, the regulatory environment in the U.S. Has been very murky, and so listing on exchanges is the one area where our sort of business organization can be challenged with respect to some securities laws. But that said, as long as the exchanges are willing to prevent U.S. trading, then it's relatively safe. The other thing that sort of makes us want to be slow and careful about listing on exchanges is we want to make sure that there are external nodes. So right now, the co-op runs all the nodes for the network. And while the co-op is a global organization and there's reason to consider it decentralized, we would like to have a lot more nodes being run outside of the co-op. And so what we want to do is that most of our listings happen after there are more external nodes, but we're going carefully and cautiously making, work with certain exchanges who have shown to be good partners and good stewards of the trading behavior within the community. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. So, Greg, there are many audiences publicly and get agreement that you are indeed a godlike person on the blockchain. But they suggest that maybe you should focus more on the market in the future. So would you agree or not with this statement? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I appreciate the sentiment. I do understand there are some good reasons for thinking about that. And one of the things that's really satisfying about working in blockchain is that you have market and software and legal issues and organizational issues all coming together. So that makes it a very interesting space to work in. We have to be at least until we have external validators, external nodes, we have to be very, very careful about anything that even slightly hints at market manipulation or anything like that. So we have to be very, very careful that there are no appearances of anything like that, and indeed no behavior of that kind either. That said, we are aware that carefully cultivating the right kind of market responses are important. We certainly believe that RChain has been not as skillful as it could have been in getting the message out. So if you track the graph of the price against the announcement of features in RChain, for 3 years, every time RChain announced the completion of a feature, the price would go down. So obviously we were not communicating the message well. So we definitely want to we want to get to a better marketing and message, but we also have to be very, very careful about not looking like we're manipulating the market. Hopefully that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so due to our time constraints, so this is our last question from the audience. So as you so this is like about very similar about our previous question. So and the RChain has a tough time previously. So but currently, do you have a plan that introduce more investor on the RChain? So maybe you can explain on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. That's a great question. So yes, actually, what we've been noticing is that we're getting more and more interest in what RChain is doing from both individual investors, and we're beginning to get attention from institutional investors. There's an interesting kind of fine line that to walk here. I'm actually very proud of the fact that to date, RChain has been entirely community funded. Up until this point, there has been zero institutional investment. As we move into the next phase where we are likely to get institutional investment, I think it's really important to work with institutions that understand our situation and our values aligned. So, for example, at the beginning of 2020, the world's largest hedge fund, BlackRock, announced its major shift into climate-related investments and away from investments like oil. So this is happening all throughout the financial world, and I want to make sure that RChain continues to work with investors who have that view in mind.
So, Greg, so our time is up, and thank you for coming today. And I think both including me and our audiences in the live talk, we both achieve many fruitful results, and we looking forward that we have some similar things like talk, like interview in the future. And so, but we have concluded today.
Well, thanks again so much for inviting me and hosting a discussion about RChain. It's really our privilege, an honor and a privilege to chat with you.
谢谢 Greg， 然后谢谢各位网友，大家再见。
Okay, see you. Take care.